On today's show, the losing streak is over for the Atlanta Hawks, and we'll touch on all of what transpired in a win over the Toronto Raptors on the road. And then, at the end of the podcast, some Lauri Markkanen trade chatter. We'll get into all of that and more on the way.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1609 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Friday evening, and today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel. If you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started, and please also make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks, and subscribe and check us out anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify on the audio side, and we're also on YouTube on the video side. It's been a very busy week and much more to come, so I appreciate everybody riding with the podcast already this week, but plenty more to get to, including a podcast tonight that has lots going on, including the Atlanta Hawks going into Toronto and winning 125-104, snapping their 5-game losing skid in the process and splitting the series in Toronto over a 3-day period. Honestly, it was one of the best defensive performances of the season for the Hawks. They gave up a season-low 104 points to the Raptors, and that included a late three that made it even a little bit have a higher number, but still, the Hawks played fantastic defensively in this game. A big run in the fourth quarter to kind of put the game away. Nothing really funny business-wise at the end of the game, just kind of a rock-solid, not wire-to-wire, but certainly they were in control for the vast majority of the game, and a very, very good win. At the end of the podcast, by the way, I'll touch on the Lauri Markkanen trade chatter that emerged on Friday. I might have led with that had the Hawks lost tonight, honestly, but because they won, we'll save it for the end. So stick around for that if you want to listen to that part of the podcast at the very end of the show. But the big headline story is still the Hawks winning and snapping the losing streak. So we'll get into that game now. By the way, this is the third game in a row that the Hawks were without DeAndre Hunter, who was listed as questionable and then missed the game with a knee issue after he's actually played the first 21 games of the season. Now he's missed the last 3. He, of course, joined Jalen Johnson on the shelf, so the Hawks were without their starting forwards once again, and that actually led to the Hawks starting Onyeka Okongwu at the power forward spot. This is the first time that has ever happened. The Hawks have been playing more and more of Okongwu at the 4 next to Capella out of necessity. In fact, Snyder used the phrase, quote, "necessity is the mother of invention," end quote, earlier this week when I actually asked him about this. And essentially, the Hawks are so small on the perimeter that they were almost forced to do this. And it worked very well in this game. I'm not sure it's going to work all the time. I do think it's going to help the defense, broadly speaking. But they went a little bit more extreme in this one. They were not planning on doing this, I think, ever as far as starting lineups are concerned. But it happened in this game, and it actually worked out very well for Atlanta. And by the way, the Hawks were underdogs at tip-off, about a point and a half. So kind of a coin-flip game in a lot of ways. But Atlanta played well, and they earned this one. So honestly, with the way this game transpired, I have to start defensively. As far as my breakdown is concerned, we'll have more on the game flow later on in the podcast. But it was, again, frankly, one of the best performances of the season for the defense, pretty clearly. Especially when you account for no Johnson and no Hunter, who are, 2 of their top 4 or 5 defenders on the entire team. That's obviously a massive loss. They had a 105 defensive rating in this game, which is excellent against anyone. Toronto was not great offensively, I will say that. But the Raptors did shoot it well from inside the arc. They were kind of ironic after I talked about this on Wednesday night's podcast, but the Raptors were, I would say, unsustainably hot from three-point range on Wednesday. That's a whole other topic that we'll save for later on, or if you want to listen to that podcast in more depth from Wednesday. I talked about it a lot there. But they regressed back to a normal level in this game at 32% from 3. That definitely helped, but the Hawks were excellent basically everywhere other than two-point defense in this game. The biggest stuff was on the margins for the most part. Now, the Raptors actually did have a big disparity in their favor at the free throw line, but Toronto did miss 11 of those free throws. But besides that, the Hawks were so good on the margins in this game. They allowed, this is the headline number probably of the entire game, they allowed 3 offensive rebounds all night long. The Raptors took 77 shots from the floor and 25 free throws. So they basically had, at least 80 live ball rebounds, at least 40 off ball rebounds. And that basically led to 3 offensive rebounds. So it is what it is. That's a little bit outlier-ish, but certainly it helps to play Capella and Okongwu together. I will be the first to say that on the glass. But the Hawks did a great job across the board. It wasn't just Clint. It wasn't just Onyeka. It wasn't just Saddiq Bey. They did a good job all the way around to avoid the Raptors, who are a good team on the offensive glass, killing them in that area. The Hawks did also did a decent job of sort of forcing turnovers in this game. Nothing remarkable. 14 takeaways for Atlanta. But this is a big thing here. The Hawks and Raptors ended up with very similar shooting numbers. So in a 21-point game, you don't often see that the teams have very similar shooting numbers, but that actually happened in this game because the Hawks were so good at everything else. And that was basically led to what transpired here. So just to give you the raw stats, the Hawks took 24 more shots from the field than the Raptors. Now, the Raptors did have more free throw attempts, but still, the Hawks had like a 10 or 11 shot, possession, etc. edge in this game. Maybe even more than that, closer to 15 in some respects. But they had a massive edge in just like possessing the ball, having more possessions, and that led to the win, even though the Hawks were just a pretty solid shooting night, nothing crazy. Defensively, they did play more drop defensively. I'm actually wondering if they're going to do that more often now. Part of that is skill-based, part of that's personnel-based, part of that's matchup-based, but Toronto's not a great shooting team. But I've said for a while, the drop is probably their best defense, especially without the playmaking available of Jalen Johnson, and especially to sort of accentuate Clint Capella. But anyway, it worked in this game in a lot of ways. Everyone bought in. Again, the two-center stuff did work, but a very well-coached performance, I thought, defensively in this game. Hawks executed very well. The Raptors didn't, make it easy either. It wasn't like Toronto just went out and missed every shot. That did not happen. A lot of times, when bad defenses have good games, it's because the other team just misses a bunch of shots. The Raptors didn't shoot well from the free throw line in this game, but they were totally normal / pretty decent from everywhere else. It's just that the Hawks were so good in all the other areas, and that was a huge part of what became, again, a pretty lopsided win by the end of this contest. Offensively, it was also very good, honestly, and that's more surprising in some ways. Now, that might sound weird because this is an offense-first team, but something I always say, this is a team built on offense. But when you go out and start Capella and Okongwu, that is a defensive first move. The Hawks can definitely still score with those guys playing together, but generally speaking, the reason why you don't want to play two centers a lot together is because of the offensive end of the floor, not because of the defensive end of the floor. And the Hawks were solid to good on offense in this game. A 123 offensive rating. By the way, the Hawks have now scored 100 points or more in 81 consecutive games. According to Hawks PR, that's the fourth longest streak in the history of the NBA. That's a wild figure. 100 points is not a huge number these days, but just to have that consistency and always getting there is actually pretty impressive. The Hawks just didn't shoot it crazy well. They shot the ball fine in this game. 51% from the floor, 39% from three. That's good for sure, above average maybe, but nothing outrageous for a team that they won this game by 21 points. The biggest shortcoming the Hawks had was the free throw line. As I mentioned before, the Raptors had a huge disparity at the line. The Hawks only had 6 free throw attempts in the entire game. That's extremely small. But ball security was fine, and the offensive glass was huge. 16 offensive rebounds in the game for the Hawks, and 24 second chance points compared to only 3 for the Raptors. Post-game, Clint Snyder talked about the fact that they were kind of want to be patient on the offensive glass, not only getting it, but also creating the best looks possible. Part of that is Capella. Capella's a great offensive rebounder. He's not always the best finisher off of those rebounds, so he was actually really good in this game, as we'll talk about more later on in the podcast. But the Hawks did a good job capitalizing on their extra possessions throughout this game. Also had 34 assists. That's an extremely positive number in a game where the Hawks were kind of shorthanded in terms of shot creation, other than their guards. So also good balance. Trey was fantastic, as we'll talk about later on, with 38 points, but they had 6 guys in double figures in this game, and basically everyone other than Trent Forrest on offense did a pretty good job. And even Trent did his job. He just didn't make shots inside the arc, but had 4 assists, etc. So the Hawks did a good job in this game across the board. I'll have more praise to heap later on in the podcast, but big picture, not like a monumental win. It's more of a coin flip game in a lot of ways, but the Hawks just needed to get this one. They have a game looming tomorrow on Saturday on the road in a tough spot schedule-wise. And obviously, when you lose 5 in a row, there's a level of desperation that sort of starts to sink in. And getting this win, the Hawks have been pretty solid on the road on the whole this year, 7-7. That's kind of all you need to do on the road usually. But a strong performance on the whole. We'll talk about more about kind of how it broke down, how it actually flowed in this game, and more. But before we get to all of that, though, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. As the weather gets colder, the NBA and NFL offers stay hot at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets. That's $150 in terms of dollars in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 in your pocket if your team wins. The awesome perks there of signing up are very obvious, but also they have everything that you're looking for across the sports betting space at FanDuel. That includes over-unders and point spreads, money lines, player props, future bets, and much more. They have live betting. They have same-game parlays. It's all there for you at FanDuel. The app is safe, it's secure, it's easy to use, and they have the entire range of sports as well, NFL, NBA, of course, college football, college basketball, MLB when it's in season, plus the future market right now, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, MMA, boxing. It's there for you at FanDuel, and they have all kinds of Hawks options as well. The game will come out on Saturday. They'll have pregame lines, they'll have live lines against Cleveland, etc. Player props is always a fun market, award stuff in the NBA, etc. as well. And now, as best possible time, set up with folks at FanDuel. And the place to go is FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And they have an offer that you will absolutely not want to miss right now. One more time here, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, to the game itself here. And at the outset, it wasn't all rainbows for the Hawks in this game. They were up by 6 at the end of the first quarter, but it was not always pretty. In fact, to open the game, Capella was 4 for 4 in the first 6 minutes of the game, which is, not crazy. The rest of the team was 1 of 7. So they were only down by 1, but that was kind of, solid defensively to start this game off. Clint had a great start offensively, rebound-wise, etc. Rotationally, obviously, we talked about Okongwu already starting. That's he actually came out at the same spot that he usually comes in, and the Hawks managed to stagger the entire way, all 48 minutes with either Clint or Onyeka on the court, despite starting those guys together. Kind of similar to what they do with Trey and DeJounte as a normal thing. I thought they might go to Bruno Fernando at some point tonight because they started Capella and Okongwu. They didn't have to in this one. In fact, the only rotation change, really, other than Okongwu starting, that they actually went to Trent Forrest as the 8th man in this game. Still only played 8 guys. Garrison Matthews was number 7 along the way, and Bogey as the 6th man. They have not wanted to use Wes Matthews on back-to-backs, and the Hawks play on Saturday. I'm not sure if that is the only reason or even a reason at all, but if head-to-head, Wes has not played both ends of a back-to-back this year so far. So that's something that we circle. If he comes back and plays on Saturday, I won't be too surprised, but I thought, I've long thought Trent Forrest is underrated. Offensively, not a great factor necessarily, but a good decision maker, good passer, and then a really good defender, albeit undersized, but the Hawks don't have a lot of size anyway. So anyway, that was the 8-man rotation in this game. They had a great close to the quarter. The Hawks scored 7 points in the last 35 seconds of the first quarter to take the lead. Basically had 2 different 2-for-1s in the same sequence, which doesn't always happen. And Bay had a nice coast-to-coast drive at the buzzer to put the Hawks up by 6 points. And they were kind of, I don't want to say in total control, but they were certainly in control on some level the entire rest of the game. It was a sloppy start in the second at some point. But, Toronto was trying to match Dennis Schroeder, old pal, to Trae Young defensively. But Malachi Flynn for the Raptors got 4 fouls in 8 minutes as a point guard. That's kind of hard to do in a lot of ways. Capella finally missed a shot, which he only missed, I believe, only a couple in this entire game. But the first one he missed, actually, he tipped the rebound out and led to a 3 from Bogdanovic, kind of what I talked about before. While I'm here, Bogey extended his franchise record. Yes, franchise record with 19 straight games of at least 2 threes. Bogey has been out of his mind for quite some time now, and that included tonight. A big run mid-quarter to go up by 12. 8-0 run late in the half. A couple threes by Trey and Sadiq Bey in that stretch, and really good defense the entire way in the first half. Capella had a great block on Dennis Schroeder on the last trip of the entire half, and they held the Raptors to exactly 1 point per possession. 49 points on 49 trips in the first half. And again, it was not because they didn't shoot the ball well. The Hawks forced turnovers and then did not give up rebounds at all on the offensive glass. And the Raptors, again, actually, the first half, the Raptors shot better than the Hawks did. And the Hawks were winning the game by 10 points because of all of the extra stuff on the margins. In the third, Hawks actually started off this third quarter 4-4 from the floor to go up by 14 points. They were really crisp offensively. Ball was moving. They ran some pick and roll. Like they were kind of in their bag in the third quarter. They couldn't quite pull away because the Raptors made a bunch of shots, actually, in the third quarter. They went very small at one point. Actually, it was a lineup of DeJounte Murray, Trent Forrest, Garrison Matthews, and Bogey around Clint. Now, they had Capella on the court, and they had limited options, obviously, in terms of size. When you go with Forrest instead of Wes Matthews, that's at least a small downgrade in size. But that's a crazy small unit that they kind of used a couple times in this game because they kind of had to, but notable there. Kind of a muddy quarter on the whole. They don't have a ton to say about it. The Raptors won the quarter with 29-28, but the Hawks were able to kind of hang around, keep their lead, and notably not basically give the game away in the third quarter. It felt a little bit danger zone-y in the fourth quarter. The Raptors were within 6 a couple times early in the fourth quarter, but at both times when they cut it to 6, the Hawks hit a 3. It was Trey the first time and then Bogey the second time. The Hawks made 4 threes in the first 4 minutes of the fourth quarter. That was a huge stretch there. Okongwu hit one of them. That was a good shot from him. They finally split up Capella and DeJounte Murray. It was kind of weird. Like for 2 games in a row, basically, they've attached DeJounte and Clint together at the hip until about a minute stretch in the fourth. A very, very odd stretch there. But anyway, it's working. The Hawks were, basically managed to cover the last 9 minutes or so in the game until absolute garbage time with their top 6 guys. It's very clear who the top 6 are right now with with DeAndre and Jalen out. It's the starters and it's Bogey, and then there's a dip, obviously, to Garrison, Trent Forrest, Wes Matthews, etc. But the big run was an 18-4 stretch in the fourth quarter to go from basically up by 6 to 20 in not in a heartbeat, but it was pretty quickly actually. They got some stops, and by the time it was 20 with 6 minutes to go, it's not over at that point, but it's pretty comfortable. They threatened to put it away a few different times. There was one timeout the Hawks kind of called when it was a little bit shaky, up 16 with about 5 minutes to go. But then after that, they slammed the door in a big way. It was 22 again, and then a timeout there from the Raptors with like 2.5 minutes to go. They waved the white flag. Trey was awesome in that stretch. I was actually surprised that Quinn kept the starters in for an extra minute or so, but Trey intentionally dribbled the ball out of bounds to get the subs in because Seth Lundy made his NBA debut in the final minute and scored. So shout outs to him, a personal favorite of mine, a guy that I wanted the Hawks to draft before they even drafted him. That was fun to see him get into the game as he was active. But yeah, I mean, mercifully, if you are a Hawks fan that was not really ready to go through all the machinations at the end of this game, no real drama down the stretch. It was kind of the big kick, the closing kick. There was a 29-13 extended run by the Hawks in the middle of the quarter, and that put the game away. So a strong effort on the whole from Atlanta, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll have the player stuff coming up in a second. In fact, we'll do the starters right now. Let's just dive in right now, shall we? Let's do it quickly. And we'll have the Markkanen talk at the end of the podcast. So, off the bench, only 8 guys played. Of course, it'll be a little bit easier. Obviously, the guys got in, Bruno and Patty Mills, and Lundy got in at the very, very end of the game. Nothing much to add there other than, again, shouts to Seth Lundy. Trent Forrest, 0-4 from the floor. Did have 4 assists and a steal and 3 rebounds. I thought he played well. Quinn talked about this after the game. He had a couple shots that he usually makes, like floaters and finishes around the rim that he missed. But I think he gives some good minutes defensively. Obviously, he's not fantastic offensively, never has been, but rock solid as a decision maker. Didn't turn the ball over at all. Just very solid. Garrison Matthews, I think he drew 4 charges in this game. That's a lot of charges to draw. A couple of those were favorable calls, I have to say, but he made both of his threes in this game, had a steal, had a rebound. I thought he played solidly well. I don't want to overstate the drawn charge. That's something he's been doing for a long time, actually. He's actually kind of an artist in that area, but I thought Garrison gave them good minutes off the bench. And then Bogey was the huge one off the bench, 20 points, 6 assists, no turnovers, plus 21 for Bogey in the game. He was 4 of 9 from 2, 3 of 7 from 3. He played great in this one, and Bogey's numbers are outrageous. He's now scored 20 points or more in 5 straight games, which is not easy to do off the bench. And then and for me, this is even crazier. He's now scored at least 13 points in 18 consecutive games. That's something that a lot of guys don't do, even when they start, other than like maybe star players. And Bogey's doing that off the bench. That's really hard to do. And again, I've been saying the last couple of days, I think he is, if not the front runner for six man of the year right now, he should be on the very short list with the way he is playing. He has been outrageous in recent days. From there to the starters, I don't think that it'd be a shock to anyone to know that everybody played pretty well in this game. I thought DeJounte was better for sure in this one. 17 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds. He still had a couple of mid stretches and wasn't efficient still. 17 points and 18 shots is not great, but good passing, good decision making for the most part. I want him to get to his spots a little bit deeper toward the rim, but he took 6-3. That's totally fine with me. And I thought he was solid. Defensively, I thought he was better than he had been the last few games. And I thought he was not fantastic, but he played pretty well. Saddiq Bey didn't shoot the ball well. In fact, he's not been shooting the ball well for the last probably week and a half. But I thought he played well. Double-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, had 4 assists, 1 turnover, plus 24, 2 of 4 from the floor, 2 of 4 from 2-point range, and 2 of 8 from the floor, from 3-point range, I should say, in this game. But I thought Saddiq did a good job defensively. He was rugged, he was physical, and he played with some juice, I will say. Okongwu, really solid, 14 points, 11 rebounds, and a block for Onyeka in 33 minutes. Only took 7 shots, made 6 of them. They won 3. I thought he did a good job being kind of just versatile and playing at the 4. You don't want to overreact to the 2 big lineup too much, but I think having Okongwu's versatility defensively in particular allows that to kind of work, and he's been able to, although he's having small usage, make it work on offense as well. So shouts to him. And then I thought Capella was excellent. 18 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 blocks in 35 minutes for Clint. That's a lot of time for him. Clint does not usually play 35 minutes in regulation, but I thought he was really, really, really good in this game. 9 of 12 from the floor, and offensive glass, defensive glass, rim protection, just an excellent game for Capella. And I thought that the two bigs were just, underrated and important in this one. And then Trey had 8 turnovers, but the rest of his game was fantastic. 38 points, 11 assists for Trey. He was 8 of 14 on 2s and 7 of 15 on 3s. He is really cooking now. In fact, from 3-point range, this is actually a crazy stat. He's averaging, he's taking more than 10 threes per game in the last 11. He's actually 49 of his last 116 from 3 in 11 games. He's averaging like 32 points a game in that stretch. Trey is playing and shooting the ball at some of his best that he's shot the ball from 3-point range in a long time. And he's in control. Obviously, the turnovers are a little bit too many. But other than that, he's been playing really well. And then defensively, he's still, again, he's not fantastic, but he has been much, much, much better this year. And that includes tonight. So, we'll see how this continues, but I think Trey has been playing very well. And that's not a small part as to why the Hawks were playing much better in this game on the whole. And a 2-way win for the Hawks. And we'll leave it there for now for the most part. But before we get to the rest of the podcast, I should always tease what's coming up. Some trade chatter discussion on Lauri Markkanen, as we'll get to that in a second. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's show is sponsored by Dave, and at one time or another, we all need a little bit of financial help. That's why Dave is fantastic for you. You can get cash with Dave when you just need a hand between paychecks and can help you build your credit by settling extra cash advances on time. Dave is the banking app that's leveling the playing field financially. When you download Dave, you can get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees as part of Dave's extra cash account. Advance the money that you need with no interest and settle up later. Extra cash gives you more money to buy groceries, fill your tank, finally get your car repaired, catch up on bills without having to wait for your next paycheck. You can even build credit while you settle up on time. And millions of folks have already downloaded the Dave app to make their finances easier. So if you're in a pinch, get the help you need by downloading Dave. Download Dave today at dave.com/LockedOnNBA. That's dave.com/LockedOnNBA. You can get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. Download the Dave app right now or go to dave.com/LockedOnNBA. And for terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility, criteria, and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC. All right, and while the lead story in Hawksland on this Friday was a much-needed victory for Atlanta, there is some other stuff to talk about, and I got questions about this today, so it's a good time to hit on this one, even though there's a back-to-back coming. There was a trade mention that arrived on Friday morning, I should say, from my guy, Jake Fisher of Yahoo, who's been on this podcast before. Jake is very plugged in, one of the best in terms of throwing around slop and getting all the reporting out there. And I got questions about this a lot, so we'll just dive in now. Today, December 15th, is kind of the unofficial start of trade season across the league, as a lot of guys are now eligible to be traded, and a lot of coverage happens as a result of that. First, Jake had some nuggets about Pascal Siakam that kind of mirror what we talk about for a long time on this podcast and talked about even earlier this week, by the way, on Tuesday's show. So if you want more on that on Siakam front, I talked about that a lot only a few days ago. So I'll breeze by that for now and talk about Lauri Markkanen. So I'll say right now, this is not right now a trade rumor in its current form. This is trade chatter, maybe, rumblings, slop, etc. But there is a link involving the Hawks right now. Jake led with this. This is why it's not a rumor in a lot of ways. Quote, Markkanen is a fascinating, albeit unlikely, trade candidate before February's buzzer, end quote. So, with that said, it's already unlikely that he'll be moved at all, much less to Atlanta. Then he wrote that the, quote, Jazz are by no means expected to trade Markkanen at this juncture, end quote, and then also that he has, quote, been a true favorite of Jazz officials, end quote. I've seen some local people now since then in Salt Lake City talking about how the Jazz were not going to trade Lauri Markkanen. I'll just say this right now before he keep going on this. I don't believe that he'll be traded. I'll be surprised if he is. But this is notable anyway. This is a credible national reporter talking about this. And it seems like, according to what Jake gathered, that some folks around the league believe that Markkanen does not seem to be fully untouchable in Utah. And crucially, he has 1 year left on his deal after this year. And the Jazz have been basically awful so far this year. That's not Lauri's fault. He's been really good this year. Nor is really their frontcourt the problem. It's kind of, they have, for me, the worst guard play in the entire league right now, and that's their actual problem. But they are struggling a lot. And the Atlanta connection here from Jake is that Jake cited, quote, league personnel in believing that 3 teams would value Markkanen at the preliminary stage, is what he said, of trade talks. And the Hawks are one of those 3 teams, along with the Kings and the Thunder. Atlanta kind of makes sense, according to Jake and according to me, honestly, because the Hawks already are kind of trying to at least gauge the market on buying. There is a whole different discussion that we will probably have more of, and I've already kind of thrown out there a little bit this week, about whether the Hawks should even be trying to buy right now, given where they are in the standings. But they've obviously been interested in Siakam in the past, and that link, they're not the same player by any means, but they're similar positionally as like combo forwards, more of a 4, etc. Short contracts, and players who are in that not super duper star, but kind of the next tier or 2 down, like top 35 guys in the league kind of tier, where Markkanen is. I'll just say this now: the price tag would be very, very high for Lauri Markkanen, in my opinion, and what I can gather around the league. He's not expensive right now, $17 million or so this year, and then $18 million next year. For instance, one of the teams that are on this list is the Thunder, who can offer a lot. They have so many picks to offer, so many picks, plus like Josh Giddey, etc. They have all kinds of assets they can offer, and the Hawks are famously now short on draft capital because of the DeJounte Murray trade. So again, the Jazz are not likely to trade Markkanen at all, but even less likely to trade him to Atlanta because the Hawks are, again, kind of limited in what they can offer. Is it impossible? No, definitely not. I think the Jazz probably would start the conversation asking for Jalen Johnson, and I think the Hawks probably would not want to do that. That's one thing. It's not impossible that the Hawks could do the deal without Jalen, but they have to give up a lot of other things. They have other stuff they can offer, of course. They have AJ Griffin, Kobe Buffkin, Sadiq Bey, even Okongwu. They have 2 first-round picks, or at least up to 2 first-round picks that they can trade. The Kings pick and then one of their own in the future. But that is not a massive arsenal of assets for someone on Markkanen's level with where the league seems to be on him. Conceivably, the Jazz might be interested in DeJounte Murray, but DeJounte's a little bit older than probably what they want in the middle of a rebuild. And anyway, there's lots of layers here. I could do an hour podcast on this, but I'm not going to do that right now. If we get more buzz on this, if we get more chatter on this, I will do a deeper dive into Markkanen as a player on this podcast. But he's 26. He's got really good size as a forward. He's averaged 20 points per game, well, actually more than that in the last couple of years. He's a good shooter. Not a great defender, but certainly one that has some size. And he's not terrible at all on that end of the floor. He's made a big leap the last 2 years, kind of a weird run before that, including 2 trades, etc. And I'm a tiny bit skeptical of him as this level of player, but he is very good. No question about that at this point in time. Some injury stuff from the past, but nothing crazy. He's been quite good in Utah, and importantly, he'd be a very easy fit in Atlanta next to Trey. I think he and Jalen would fit together very well at the forward spots. I think he would work next to a center because he can shoot, etc. The fit there is not really questionable whatsoever. So anyway, certainly a guy to monitor and be interested in and explore, but it's very, very preliminary right now in mid-December. And the reality is, in my opinion now, that if there was an actual bidding war for Markkanen, the Hawks would not be in the best position possible to win that bidding war. They could potentially still win it if the Jazz like whatever they have, but they are hamstrung on picks. They don't have a ton of assets compared to a team especially compared to the Thunder. The Thunder have unlimited picks to offer if they want to offer them. But also, like Danny Ainge, who's in charge, by the way, in Utah now, is kind of notorious for trying to win every deal and asking for wild returns back, especially for a player like Markkanen. So this might be interesting in terms of trade chatter. Of course, John Collins is there. There's some connection there with a deal that happened this summer, etc. But long story short, this is a new name on the radar, a very good player, and Hawks fans kind of dream about that. Get your fake Photoshops of Lauri Markkanen jerseys back into the mix there. But the deadline is 6 weeks, 7 weeks away at this point in time. There's more to come, but if I had to guess, it's not likely, but hey, I won't call it impossible, and it's a name to at least explore in the next couple of weeks and months. All right, that's all I have on today's podcast, but we should at least say the Hawks play again on Saturday. A tough travel spot with a back-to-back going from Toronto to Cleveland. Cleveland's now lost 3 in a row, however, and importantly, the Cavs have major injury concerns. They're actually going to be without Evan Mobley and Darius Garland. So 2 of their the Hawks have obviously a lot of good players. The Cavs have 4 guys who are very clearly their top 4 guys, and 2 of them are not playing in this game. So that's notable for sure. The Cavs are still a team that you can't take lightly. In fact, the Hawks are still underdogs. Even with Garland and Mobley out of the lineup right now, the Hawks are still, according to our friends at FanDuel, underdogs in the game. Part of that is a situation because the Hawks have a back-to-back and the Cavs don't, but I saw some Hawks fans talking about that how this game was going to be a trap game. I would not say that. The Hawks are not supposed to win this game even with all that stuff because the Cavs are still decent and also it's a tough spot for the Hawks. So I say all that. It's basically the same exact point spread as tonight's game was. So we'll see if the Hawks can sort of overcome that and sweep it back to back. But it's got another reason why, again, this game tonight was such a big win for the Hawks is that they could not afford to go into Saturday having lost again and with poor vibes and all that stuff in an already tough spot. So I've said all I need to say, but a great day for the Hawks, a good win for the Hawks in Toronto, and the losing streak is no more, and we'll have more coverage coming up after the game on Saturday. With all that said, please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, places like Apple and Spotify on the audio side, as well as YouTube on the video side. Ratings and reviews appreciated. Also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. I'm also at patreon.com/BT Rowland on the written side of the ledger. And one plea at the end of the podcast. I know it's Friday night into Saturday, but if you are a Hawks fan that knows other Hawks fans that might enjoy this podcast, please share it with them either on YouTube or on the audio platforms. Text them, whatever you can do to get this podcast in front of somebody else. It would definitely help me if you went ahead and did that. So I really appreciate all the support on the podcast. As always, we'll have a show about 24 hours from now after the game in Cleveland, and we'll see you all next time.